meeting to order. Note for the record, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Gendelmeyer are here. We're also joined by Alderwoman Tierney and Alderman Savage. I don't see any other aldermen, but there may be others. All right, first on our agenda is approval of the agenda. We've been having a discussion offline about amending the agenda to add an item. Alderman Arnett, would you like to make that request to amend the agenda?
Unfortunately, I think I need to discuss the request because I copied you and Brooks on an email that I just received from the mayor. I also copied the city manager on there. So the thing that I wanted to put on the agenda for a hearing was the proposed new form from the harbor master to manage the newly acquired long dock. And I see we have people lined up. We may want to entertain discussion, but I was asking for that to be put on the agenda per the requirements of Ordinance 0621. But I don't think the prerequisites have been met in terms of that being published in the paper and put on the website.
Alderman, can I get an amendment to amend the agenda to include a discussion of 0621 and how it's being implemented?
Yes, that is my amendment.
Could I get a second on that? Alderman Gendelmeyer, you're muted.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from the February 4th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next item is appointment of Mr. Jim Martin to the Arts and Public Places. Is Mr. Martin with us today?
Yes.
You bring him forward. Mr. Martin, you are muted. Welcome. Can you tell us about yourself and your continued interest? I think you've been on Arts and Public Places previously. Tell us about your interest in, hi there you are. Tell us about your interest in Art and Public Places. You're muted. Mr. Okay. Martin, oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now? All right, obviously I've been around a long time and I've been active in the arts community as far as the Annapolis Arts District. And I was a printer for about 40 years and had lots and lots of activity with artists all the time. My interest is as a former sponsor of concerts in Whitmore Park, now the People's Park. I hope to involve more communities of color and more communities who we don't often involve in our downtown activities. We were very successful with our music concert series during the summers with Larry Griffin and Eric Evans and myself, along with a number of local talented organizations and bands. And I'm hoping that we can revive some activity in the West Street area, and Chambers Park already is an active program. And we need to expand our efforts in the world of music and performance, as well as the graphic arts of murals and sculpture and paintings. I was on the Arts District Board when we brought David Hayes to Annapolis, and there are sculptures all around town. This was a kind of an experiment to see how well this would work out. The sculptures have been well received, and we found sponsors. And I'm hoping that As a commission, we can target how we bring more people of color, more age groups to be involved in performance activities in the city.
Well, thank you. And as I mentioned, I thought you were already on Arts in Public Places, but you've definitely been intimately involved with art in our city for a long time. Are there any questions for Mr. Martin? I see Alderman Schnellmeyer's hand and then Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, I've worked with you a lot in the past on various things around Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Excuse me. And I just wanted to say I'm very excited that you're stepping up to join this commission, and you got my full support. I think you're going to do wonderful things there.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice of you.
Thank you. Alderman Gay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak at the committee meeting. Mr. Martin, I'm glad that you were reading my mind as it relates to increasing the demographics and participation in both race and age into some of these events. I would love to help you in any way I can. You know, we need hip hop in the city of Annapolis desperately. We have a large youth African-American community that gravitates towards that music, and we don't offer that for them. And they need a place to enjoy themselves and to enjoy what the city has to offer, just as everyone else does. And so I would love to support you in that. Thank you.
Thank you. We can always use encouragement. In the first Sunday Arts Festivals, which I was a partner, we did have a hip hop performance, and it was surprisingly popular. I didn't think hip hop would have caught on at that time. This was 2 years ago. But it really is big in Annapolis, and you're right. We need more ways to allow it to be expressed and to have venues where they can perform. We have a lot of talent in Annapolis, and most Annapolitans, from my experience, have no idea of the local talent that we have. And many of those folks graduate to national talent and become quite well known. So I'm looking to sponsor that, or to encourage it, and encourage the commission to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Arnett, I'm sorry, I hadn't seen your hand before, Alderman.
Not a problem. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, we also have another exciting thing that is starting to unfold, which is the acquisition of the old part of Carr's Beach. And I'm hoping that we can marry up Carr's Beach and the Peerless Wren. But that is another kind of music for some of us of a older vintage than hip hop that we would like to see invited back to the city to make a tour. And I watch on public television the Motown groups performing at the Lyric and so on. So I hope we don't forget about that cohort as well. But mainly I want to say it's good to see you again. It's been a while. And Madam Chair, unless there's other comment, I would make a motion that we recommend favorably on this nomination.
Appreciate that.
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? I couldn't agree with what you all have said. I've known Jim for a long, long time, and I know the work that he's done in our city, and it's been significant. So again, thank you, Jim, for all that you've done and for your planning going forward. Looking forward to it. So the motion is that we give Mr. Martin a favorable recommendation to his appointment of Arts in Public Places. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Your name will go before the full council at the next meeting, I guess on the 11th. No need to be there, but you're always welcome to join us. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. Next item is a discussion item, historic preservation furniture guidelines. Mr. Tower, is Mr. Tower with us? There's Mr. Tower. He is the Assistant Chief of Historic Preservation. Mr. Tower, you sent us some pictures. Are we supposed to buy that furniture or what's up with that?
Correction, Madam Chair, he's the chief.
I was just reading what it says there.
I know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tower, Chief of Historic Preservation. Mr. Tower, you're on mute. There you are.
There.
Okay.
So tell us about these guidelines for furniture, for outdoor furniture.
Well, it's not just pictures. Those are suggestions for each restaurant. So what we have done is, and I can give you some history here. And Tim Leahy is also present, and I think he would like to be promoted to panelist too. He's the chair of the HPC.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Mr. Leahy. Welcome.
You're muted, Tim.
Yes, that's going to be the mantra for the rest of our life. You are muted. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here.
And is he frozen for everybody or just me?
Everybody.
Yeah, you're frozen, Tim. So I can, while Tim's frozen, I can go ahead and go over the some of the. You're unfrozen for a moment there, Tim, and frozen again. So I'm just going to get into it here. Outdoor furniture and fixtures have been part of the city code since 1995, when it was added by ordinance. Then further guidelines were enacted in 2011. It fits our charter since the HPC was established to preserve a quality of life, strengthen local economy, and foster civic beauty. We've been talking about revising the guidelines for outdoor furniture since the early pandemic, but of course there were murmurings about this long before the pandemic ever started, and constant requests from the restaurant community for umbrellas, et cetera. Knowing that the emergency order was going to end in April, we began working with the restaurants at the market space, 6 restaurants, to refine and change the guidelines to better serve the restaurants and their diners. Tim, do you want to take over from here?
Yeah, I apologize. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm on an older computer. Sorry. Our next steps really came into focus in the December timeframe when the leases were passed on the city dock area, the market space. And we realized that our existing guidelines, which have, believe it or not, been in place since 1995, and then again updated in 2011. So we realized we needed to up our game a little bit and improve the guidelines to consider all of the new things we learned during the pandemic. Again, I'll pause and make sure you can hear me okay.
We can.
You're good.
Thanks. So our earlier guidelines referred to a few items like planters and chairs and things. And in fact, they prohibited umbrellas. So literally 2 years ago, Sally Nash and I and Roberta, if you remember, talked about how can we make this more current with the needs of our community. So we came up with these drafted guidelines. We looked at other communities around the United States and Europe, actually. And we looked at tables, benches, chairs, shading devices, trash receptacles, planters, lighting, and heaters, which...
Oop.
I think you've gone mute again, though it doesn't say you're muted.
Frozen.
There we go.
He's not frozen, but he's not,
Yeah,
we can't hear him. Kia, could you try to unmute him?
It's a connection issue.
He's unmuted. It's just his bad reception, I think.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right, Brooks. It's my bad connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I'll make it real brief. We drafted the new guidelines. The commission approved them in a public hearing in January. We posted them on the website per the requirements. We got 2 comments. I'll pause. One had to do with just general support for outdoor dining. And the other had to do with an issue more having to do with dining in parking lots. So we had 2 comments. Pause again.
You're still good right now.
All right. Maybe I just need to talk slower, huh? Then by the process is that we come to the Rules Committee here and ask for input. And whatever input you have today, we'll incorporate. And this is also another opportunity for public comment. And then based on your comments, what we'll do is modify whatever you are interested in. And then we produce a report, pausing again, for City Council, which will, the HPC produces a report for City Council. In the meantime, John has been working with the merchants on Main Street, and they've been using these guidelines that you see before you, and making progress. We're taking input. We have discussed this. We will discuss it again based on this meeting at our HPC meeting on the 12th. So that's basically where we are. And by the way, I had to say at the beginning, it's hard to follow arts in public places because this is like the opposite. But our charge is to foster civic duty also. And this is, I believe, part of that.
Alderman Arnett, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Tim and John. 3 things. On the very last page where you're showing the umbrellas, give people a chance to get there. Is that City Dock with the boutique hotel in the background?
Very funny.
It might be if you were in Florence.
No, I think it's Sienna. Not to be, isn't that Sienna?
Yeah, okay. On a serious note, first of all, I will, in a second, defer to the Alderwoman from Ward 1, because I know she's been working on this, but also it'll have a pretty direct impact on Ward 1. But what I don't notice here, and it is something that is bothering me quite a bit, and I'm not sure. is considered furniture, but it does seem to me like we ought to have rules for temporary structures. And I'm thinking tents or whatever, all of the different hodgepodge of things. I'm struck that HA cited the view of downtown Annapolis coming in from the harbor, and it was of Hopkins Plaza, and it really is a wonderful, iconic view. But now it looks like it's also a view where we have some refugees from Uruguay there, not Uruguay, wherever that is, over there in Europe. So are there plans to do standards for those kinds of things as well, particularly in the historic district? And I'm also thinking of borrowing it for conservation districts as well.
Well, there are, Ross, and tents are not an approved feature in the guidelines.
Aha, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, so they're not. Umbrellas are, and the major problem, I mean, just from what we've seen over the last 2 years, is there's a lack of continuity in the appearance of the different tents, and also it blocks views of buildings for everyone. So good for temporary shelter, but not good for the neighborhood. So we're going with a lower scale with umbrellas.
Right, and that is how it is in either awnings coming off of buildings as in streets in Paris, or grapes here in the tower, clock tower, or tables with umbrellas, usually Cinzano in Europe. And so it's truly al fresco dining. It's not dining in a temporary structure. But if we get into temporary structures, I think we're going to need to go look at Title 17, because these ancillary structures are very clearly defined there in terms of their size and things like that. But what is not addressed, and that's why I think talking to HPC is appropriate, are aesthetics. And of course, as you just raised, John, the blocking of what are iconic views of the city. So yeah, I think that's something that needs to go on the list. And then you do have the verbal write-up of the revisions, and I skimmed it. I didn't go through it in any detail, but that certainly would be a good guide for people that want to know what they can and cannot do and should not put out there. So it seems to me like you're going through the requirements from the ordinance from last year. So I appreciate that. But the last thing is, maybe she'll raise her own hand, but would be interesting to see how the representative from Ward 1 views these, since this is where it's going to be most impactful.
Thank you. This is sort of momentous because Historic Preservation Commission guidelines are pretty sacred, and for a revision and the effort that they put into this, I just really want to thank both John and Tim. I'm not being sarcastic. I just think that this is something that you didn't really have to do, but you had to do. As far as Ross's question, they looked at everything in their purview. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. So your question as far as temporary structures is not addressed to them, or artwork or that kind of stuff.
No,
yeah.
oh, specifically, again, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Tents are not allowed by our guidelines. They are subject to guidelines or rules and regulations from other parts of the code. And they generally do with events.
I am curious about Alderman Arnett's question. Would he be able, I know these are in the HPC guidelines, so for within the historic district, but would Alderman Arnett very simply be able to adopt these for the conservation district?
It will not be simple, Ellie. Remember, we're talking about my constituents, and they're very much, we don't want to be like Ward 1, even though we're like.
Yeah, no, I just think for consistency, but that's totally up to you. This all came about because Market House showed their original design, and it looked like a cafeteria. It was, and so then John went to work, and this is the result of that. So upon approval, Market House will then order, if they haven't already, on good faith, I'm not sure of the status of that, and we'll be looking at a different area than what you see right now. And my constituents and everyone I know is really looking forward to the tents that look pretty old. Thank you.
Mr. Tara?
Just FYI, the market space restaurants have been fairly active in working with me about their choices, presenting them prior to ordering. And I also want to say the mayor is very serious about this being having a good, positive, and let's say pleasant aesthetic outcome. He wants it to look good. He's let everyone know this is an opportunity for restaurants to do something good. That's not just the market space, that's all around town. It's a holdover from the city working with restaurants during the pandemic to help them. And there's an opportunity to really have a beautiful city with outdoor dining, free of beer advertisements and such. And some restaurants are really excited about this. So anyway.
To Ross's comment, if you can hear me okay, that Cinzano, actually beer and advertising is not going to be, it's not permitted under the guidance we're proposing.
Thank you. Alderman Chandlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have a question out of curiosity on just some of the materials and sizes and et cetera picked. Was there a reason that those items alone, that those items were chosen? Was it just like the committee thought they fit in the best with the historic character? Was it like these have been around for a while? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious, like what was like the thought process for some of this stuff?
They're actually just examples, and
okay.
The written guidelines mention that whatever fixtures and furnishings are chosen, they should be complementary or sympathetic to the surrounding architecture. So where you have there are choices from modern to traditional, from 19th century cafe to design within reach, and all of them are acceptable. They simply have to conform and work with the adjoining architecture, conform with guidelines, work with the adjoining architecture.
Yeah, to chime in there a little bit, we are, as a commission, we are writing these guidelines, and we are aware that John is going to be, these are going to be applied administratively, by the way. They don't have to have a public hearing for every design, which is consistent with the way it's been for sidewalk cafes for a long time, for more than 30 years. But we as commissioners wanted to give John some things that he could quote unquote and provide to the applicant. So the dimensions, et cetera, had to do basically with human scale.
Are we going now, Mitch?
And the sidewalk, the scale of our buildings, the human scale of what's going on, the materials, have to do again with our brand, if you will, our quality. And again, we are asking from a color point of view for not strikingly brilliant, which words were chosen specifically, and that's somewhat subjective. But so to answer your question, Brooks, we did go through a process and look at that. But in the end, John is the one who has to administratively apply these, and he needs help sometimes to give him direction. So we're trying to do that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Alderman Gay, and then Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Towers or Mr. Lay, I couldn't see who had mentioned it, but I believe you mentioned that there were no permissions for advertisement, and particularly the dreadful signs that hang over and are in the traffic and are just whipping in the wind. Please tell me that is not a part of the Historic Preservation Commission's approval.
Yeah, if you get in any finals or anything.
That is correct. There are no advertisements permitted. And
I love track
anything
because
that
it's so awesome.
already feather
like
type
Chariots
signs or
Safari,
other
you're a
signs
sportsman,
are
you're
subject
riding
to
other
existing
people's
sign regulations,
There's no real trash talk.
which are enforced. So.
And also, I didn't see note of
How do these guys have time to
any like of the temperature controlled or the decks or things that they often used in DC. Is that possible as well, considering, especially on Main Street where the road is slender? I've seen it at restaurants in DC where they actually build out wooden, like looks like stalls outside of the restaurants. They're all connected. Is that allowed or?
Go ahead, John.
The base is allowed. I can't visualize exactly what you're saying, but the base is allowed. And of course, restaurants during the pandemic were using the wrong way boardwalk bike path as their basis out into the street, and that would be used for parklets now. So yes, that's allowed.
I guess I could also better put the question as, would enclosed structures be permitted?
Now, I can, we would call that under umbrella, but I can, thanks Alderman Gay, I can update the, our guidelines. We called it shading devices and umbrellas, but we could modify that to enclosed roof structures and clarify that they're not permitted. I would recommend.
Madam Chair, may I respond to that subject?
Sure.
Yes. The objective of the parklets, are seasonal, meaning that we don't plan to have heating and enclosed spaces, with the exception of the lease that the City Council approved on the Market House space. So I just wanted you to know that this is for seasonal furnishings.
I appreciate that clarification. And I will I'll maybe have the city clerk send over John and Mr. Leahy's email so I could send an example. I wasn't thinking of like the tents or the globes, but more of those. I wish I could actually show you right now, but like in DC, they have like they're closed structures, but they're okay.
Yeah, I know exactly. In Philadelphia, they had a great campaign of enclosing them. They had these well-designed. They look great, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I think we should update the guidelines to include a direction on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to talk about item 4, barriers and railings, as it relates to item 7, because I see under 4, the last bullet does not include suspended wires for support of free-flowing hangings. And the kind of free-flowing hangings I was thinking of would be lights that would be flowing from some kind of support. But when you go to 7, it really seems to say the only lighting other than that provided from streetlights or from the building itself would be fixtures on the table. Thinking about the interior of Cafe Normandy and some of the things that I like, it's over on Wisconsin Avenue in DC for years. They had lights strung in trees and in various other kinds of structures to sort of beautify a little bit the space. But I'm concluding from this that in combination with number 4 and number 7, we're not envisioning any kinds of structures like that where there would be posts or whatever and lights could be strung between them that would be clearly a height higher than 3 feet. Is that, am I correctly ascertaining your thinking on that?
You're correct. The lighting is limited to tabletop lighting.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a question. Looking at the attachments, both of my attachments are exactly the same.
Yeah, I sent a subsequent email with the text.
Ms. Green, do you have that document, or did you send it to us or straight to staff? Because mine is not attached.
The one that he sent over today is not attached, but I do have it, and we can put it up on the screen. Give us 1 second, okay?
Okay. So while we're waiting, Mr. Tower, the next step, is it simply to take this report to the full council, or that's not necessary and just our notification and the public notification is all that's needed?
We believe that that's adequate under 0621.
Mm-hmm. And publishing it in the paper, I think it said also. So those are the 3 things. On the city's website.
Yeah,
we've done that.
Okay.
And in the paper as well. And I think it's an interesting I applaud the legislation. The onus is back on the commission now based on the input we've gotten from our various public outreaches, including your meeting. The commission actually creates a report with the same timeline that we've talked about today, and then any additional comments and modifications, and we provide that to City Council in a report on a timely basis, which we'll do very quickly. And then apparently after is notification, basically, then I think the code reads after 2 City Council meetings. It's already in effect, but it becomes the comment period is.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be having a discussion on 0621. That's the next discussion in today's meeting.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So.
Well, it certainly puts a lot on your plate, Madam Chair.
Yes, and we're going to try to fix that.
Happy to, yeah. I think it's, so yes, so our next step after this meeting is I think I've gotten some great comments here. I will be bringing them up to the commission. We'll make some minor modifications. I think if in general you're feeling okay about what we've prepared, and John is already using them, we'll prepare a report for the city council for the next city council meeting. Mm-hmm. Well, probably the first in May. Probably would make sense.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Green, could you move that up on the screen a bit? Okay.
As she's, we did take the guidelines that were already in place for sidewalk cafes, which were a term that was used 10 years ago, but now, given what we've all been through, it's expanded quite a bit. So we, as a group, took them and expanded them into these 7 or 8 different categories. So you'll see that.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think at this point it would be appropriate to note for the minutes, for the record, that the committee has received and reviewed with the HPC the proposed changes to the guidance, and we had a positive conversation. So I would make that motion to add that to the action minutes for the record.
Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
Okay. So the motion is that we will acknowledge receipt of these changes or these recommended, outdoor furniture and fixtures guidelines, and that we've reviewed them and we're satisfied, or it's met. We're not sure whether we need to make a motion on it or approve them. That's what we were talking about. Or we just acknowledge that you've done this work and show our appreciation for you having done it.
Right.
So,
yes, that's the sense of it.
Yes.
They're the alpha test for the new code. So I think what we really, all we need to do is to note for the record that we've received and reviewed. I would like to add positive comments that we had a good dialogue and we're positively impressed with the guidelines, but that's probably more than necessary to meet the code.
Well, and I think the motion that's on the floor has met our needs. So, Alderwoman Tierney, did your hand go up or down?
Well, yeah, up and down. I think Alderman Arnett answered my question. I wasn't sure on whether or not you needed to see them again, but it sounds like no. And I also wanted to tell my colleagues, last city council meeting, I did introduce legislation. It went to first reader, adding parklets to the sidewalk cafe language. So that ties the furnishings and everything else together between the sidewalk cafes, which we have, and this. So I just wanted to tell you that, and I'll say it again during the city council meeting.
Thank you. Did you say you had a public hearing already on these recommendations? Mr. Tower or Mr. Leahy?
Yes, during our regular public hearing meeting in January 11th, they were on the agenda, and they have been actually on all of our public meetings each time. Well, it's certainly the February meeting, so it's been posted on our agenda.
Because that is one of the requirements, I think, in 0621. So there's
held it open.
It indicates a public hearing, and so the way we interpreted it as our public hearing in January was that public hearing.
Yeah, I think that meets the need. So I think you've satisfied that, definitely. So there's a motion on the floor to acknowledge receipt of the outdoor dining furniture guidelines as presented by the Historic Preservation Commission, and that they have met all of our guidelines. And so all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I will try to embellish our recommendation even more when we present to the council, whenever this comes on our agenda. So thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Yep, thank you for this effort.
Yeah, they were the guinea pigs on 0621. Good job, Tim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 0621.
What about the rest? Yeah.
Actually, I was going to do both discussion items at the same time, but I know we have people waiting, so I'm going to go to legislative action and then come back to committee discussion. So the next item on the agenda is R1522, the Anne Arundel County Coalition for Police Accountability Recommendations. This is Alderman Savage and Alderman Gay are the sponsors. Would either of you like to speak to this?
I'll defer to Alderman Savage if he wants to go first.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair and Alderman Gay. Yeah, I don't have too much to add besides what I said at the initial meeting, just to reiterate that these are in support of some of the recommendations that a larger coalition and our Human Relations Commission had recommended. And I felt like it was important to speak up since we will be impacted by the county legislation and the county city board that ends up getting created. So I just thought it'd be important to have a discussion about that. And as far as where the county is right now, my understanding is they have a number of amendments that has been introduced. And my understanding is that there may be more introduced, but I believe their next meeting, so they might be able to take a final vote at the next meeting. I'm not sure what they're going to do if it ends up getting amended again. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Gay? Anything further?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Similar to my colleague, I think we've all had enough time to discuss in detail some of the suggestions and recommendations. I agree, though. I think it's important that we extend support to what the county is doing and what our constituents care about. There are people in Annapolis that care deeply about this issue and they'd like to see it succeed. And so I'd like to support it in that way. And I've also had an opportunity to discuss in great detail this legislation, the state legislation and county legislation with our Assistant City Attorney, Carrie Berger. And, so there are some things that have to be addressed, but obviously we'll leave that to the county to decide on those amendments, and some of which they've already opposed based on legalities. And so I think, this is the best effort that we could put forward. And it should be fairly simple for us to just support what the state and county are doing.
Thank you, Alderman. We have three members of the coalition, I believe, with us. I'm not sure all of you were members of the coalition, but Ms. Cruz, would you like to begin, and welcome?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee and other city council people and city employees. I'm here with Joshua Hatch from the Caucus of African American Leaders and Leanna Harrison from CASA. And we are and I'm Amy from the ACLU of Maryland and also a resident of Annapolis and in Eastport. So Alderman Arnett is my representative. We have a really unique coalition. We're the Coalition for Anne Arundel Coalition for Police Accountability, and we are 21 organizations strong. And I've been just so incredibly impressed by this coalition and its efforts over the last couple of months. We have weekly meetings where a majority of our membership is able to attend and participate. And I've been in lots of coalitions in my many years of doing civil rights type work. And this has been one where it really feels like everyone is very engaged and has a say in the positions that we're taking and then the tactics in order to try to get some of our amendments to Bill 1622 at the county level. So I'm gonna kind of start it off, but I know that both Joshua and Leanna will have particular points that we want to make about the bill and our concerns and our requests to the county. So the bill that was, I think number one, we have some concerns about just the way that the entire legislation was drafted and proposed. Some of you may know, but not everyone, that a number of our organizations were actively involved with the county administration in drafting a civilian review board. Much like Annapolis, which was like on the road to trying to have a community-driven civilian review board based on what a really diverse subset of the community in Annapolis wanted through the advisory board that had been formed. We were actually further along at the county level in drafting a civilian review board bill with the law department and Stuart Pittman and his administration. And, you know, we got our hopes up, I'll be honest. The bill was looking really, really good. And I'm somebody who, I should have said this before, I'm on the Civilian Review Board in Baltimore City. I've been there, I've worked as a non-voting member for 6 years. I have been to plenty of conferences about civilian oversight and know people across the country who are doing various types of civilian review, civilian oversight of police. And what we were looking at the county was really on the better side, the stronger side of civilian review boards. But then House Bill 670 happened, and very quickly, the people at the table drafting the bill were not any of our organizations. We were talked to, and this is something that both county executive and I have gone back and forth. They were doing a lot of community engagement in the way of telling us what they were going to do. But they were just telling us what they were going to do. We started off, I think, with 7 recommendations, and now we're down to 6. And not one of them has been accepted by the administration in terms of their support to the county council. And then some of our more minor amendments more recently have also been rejected. One example of that is that police accountability boards should be made up of the community, obviously, but it really should be reflecting the populations that are most affected by policing. So, you know, in most places we're talking about people of color, specifically Black people and Latinx people, but sometimes it's also people with disabilities and maybe people who don't have homes, that sort of thing. That's really the people who have disproportionate interactions with the police should be making up this police accountability board. And there were many things in this draft bill that were slanted towards professionals and academics. And as a professional, you know, person who has like academic understanding of these things, I'm saying that the board should not be made up of a bunch of people like me. That's not the right approach. And there's one provision in the bill that lists a bunch of professional and academic expertise or experience as their list of example qualifications for this board. So one of the amendments that was sponsored by Chair Lisa Rodvian and Sarah Lacey, and I believe, but got more votes than that, was to remove, but didn't pass, was to remove those professional affiliations because they are misleading and they're going in the wrong direction. That was not a big ask. We're just asking them to remove. It was an unnecessary thing in the bill to have a list of, that could be in like the rubric, if you have a rubric for selection, but it didn't need to be in the bill. Our opposition was really fundamental in that it was misguided and that it would discourage the exact people that we want on the board. I'm using this as an example of something that we have been having lots of conversations, and yet the administration has not supported our amendment to remove that. So I'm starting with some of the most fundamental concerns that we've had about the process of this legislation and the membership. I'm hoping that Joshua Hatch will talk about some other concerns we have about the membership pieces. But the one other thing I want to address as ACLU and somebody with oversight experience is that, and to all due respect to one of my very good friends, Alderman Dewan Gay, I think that there has been major misstatements made about the legality of what we are trying to do. And we have some state legislators who are extremely busy right now because it's session, who have said that they will go on record for us to say that the intent of the state was not at all for this to be the ceiling or the cap, or that you can't do anything more than what House Bill 670 says. So we already have that. We also just have the letter of the law. We have lots of lawyers who read this and say, this is a ceiling and not a floor. This was created for some base standard for every county to then create the police accountability board that was right for them. So for Anne Arundel County, that seemed like we would have thought that Stuart Pittman and others would have saw that that we could do what we were trying to do with the Civilian Review Board, and the PAB could have been that. There is nothing in House Bill 670 that prevents us from going further, but the law department of both of both the city of Annapolis and the county have said that it would be illegal for us to go further. One other piece of evidence that that's not true, that it's not necessarily only, they've also made an argument that the intent of the state was that everybody needs to have this exact same bare bones PAB, is that 92 delegates voted for House Bill 991, which is unfortunately tabled at this point, but 92 delegates a week ago voted for a bill that would have given the Baltimore City Police Accountability Board investigatory powers, AKA going further than House Bill 670. So there is no universal clear intent that all of the state delegates and state senators wanted House Bill 670 to mean that PABs couldn't have, police accountability boards can't have investigatory powers, which was one of our main recommendations. And my last point will be about that, because that is something that I feel extremely strongly about, and so do the rest of our coalition members. If we do not have a PAB, Police Accountability Board, with investigatory powers, that means that we have a system where only police investigate the police. That undermines the entire purpose for the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. It also undermines the massive call for police accountability of 2020, and just not literally going against what the entire House Bill 670 was hailed all over the news by all the legislators as being this huge reform. Well, I can tell you, if we do not have independent investigations into police, we do not have nothing. We will have taken a large step backwards. And at the Civilian Review Board in Baltimore City, where we do concurrent investigations, CRB does investigations at the same time as Internal Affairs. Investigators have testified to the county council, CRB investigators, that people are more willing to talk to them. Witnesses are more willing to talk to them and trust them and tell them information and give them evidence than they will to the police. These are often people who have already had their rights violated by police or feel like they have, and they're more likely to cooperate or whatever with the CRB investigators. That is one of the reasons why 26% of concurrent investigations, the CRB and the IA disagree. It's not because they disagree because they have a difference of opinion in what right and wrong policing is. It's because the investigations yield different information. That is such a critical reason why we need to have independent investigations. And I know I just took a lot of time. I'm sorry. I just this is something that we've been working a lot on, and I want you to have full information. I do want to make sure that both Joshua Hatch and Leanna Harrison have time to add, because there's more details about the membership pieces in our recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. I think what you provided in the form of background is crucial for all of us to understand where we are and how important this piece of legislation is. So thank you. Mr. Hatch?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good
So
afternoon.
do you want to share with us your feelings about our legislation, and especially as it relates to the counties?
Yes, and please forgive me. Amy did an excellent job speaking about some of the concerns. And of course, I'm new to testifying in hearings like this, so I'm a little nervous. So you have to forgive me. I'm not a great public speaker.
You're fine. Thank you.
It's not true at all either.
I've heard him. I know.
So I'm Joshua Hatch, and I'm a resident of Annapolis. Just a little bit about my background. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Freedom Fighters, LLC. I'm also the Public Safety Committee Chair for the Caucus of African American Leaders. I am a coalition member for it is a program that the Annapolis Police Department have for the youth. I'm a coalition member. It's a coalition of organizations that provide supportive services to address, some of the issues that are going on with the youth. So I'm a coalition member of that. And I'm also a service provider for the Annapolis Police Department Positive Impact Program as well. Just to give you a little bit of clarity on some of the things that I do, I represent individuals who go before the Maryland Parole Commission, and my primary focus is to put together an individualized release plan for individuals who have been justice involved, to help them transition back into society and to ensure that those individuals don't recidivate, they don't reoffend. As the Public Safety Committee Chair, I meet with police chiefs, state's attorneys, attorney general. I tour correctional facilities. All of these meetings and tours and interactions that I have are all geared towards bridging the gap of the relationship of community members and the criminal justice system that has a fractured relationship with the community. One of the things that Amy was talking about is how the community is more likely to speak to someone who looks like me rather than someone who is in a uniform, because the relationship that the community currently has with the police department is one where the community members do not trust the police. Sure, they may have a relationship with an individual officer who patrols their neighborhood, but the overall relationship has been fractured and destroyed because of all the lives that have been lost with individuals that are in the custody of the police, who have been pulled over by the police, who have been profiled by the police. And I'm not saying that all officers do that. I know some pretty good officers that I would trust to leave my entire family under their watch and care. But we cannot judge a department based off of individual relationships. We have to look at the totality of the relationship between the police department and the community. And unfortunately, there have been too many instances where the police department or representatives of the police department have destroyed that relationship based on their interactions in the deaths, in custody deaths of individuals under their care. I was supposed to be talking about membership, and I heard Alderman Gay talk about supporting the county. And, you know, there's a lot of legalities of the Police Accountability Board. But respectfully, Alderman Gay, I think there's some of the things that have been said at those county council meetings have been completely incorrect, a mischaracterization of the ability of membership, and flatly, to be honest, an outright lie. I'm gonna give you an example. During one of the meetings, one of the council members, forgive me for not remembering the name, asked a question from the law department, and that was, and this was directly as it relates to membership, are returning citizens allowed to vote? The answer that the law department gave, and Amy, please correct me if I'm wrong, was no. That was his response. That's not true. That's a lie. Returning citizens are allowed to vote. Why do I know that? Because I'm a returning citizen. And I vote. And not only do I vote, but as you just heard, there are a lot of interactions that I have with the criminal justice system. And to place a barrier on a person like myself to serve on the Police Accountability Board, not only is it backwards, because best practices says that individuals who are impacted the most by police interactions should be those individuals who serve on the board. Because we understand that policing is a 50-50 relationship between the police department and the community, but what type of message are we sending? Everybody makes mistakes, and I'm not immune to it, I'm sorry. But should my mistake place a permanent barrier on me being involved to improve our Annapolis, Anne Arundel County? It's certainly not when they need me to come speak at a press conference, because I've been down in emergency management several times, called in by guess who? The police department. I've been called several times by the police department for individuals who are returning and they don't know what to do with them. So they call me in when they need me. And I'm just not speaking about me. Please understand that I'm speaking about a whole pool of individuals who could add insight, who can help to improve the relationships of the police department. But you are preventing them from excelling and from being a part of the solution and permanently assigning them to a part of the problem. Annapolis has an issue, and I'll wrap up too, I'm sorry, I know that time is running down, but Annapolis has an issue with the youth. Just like Anne Arundel County, I met with the chief out in Montgomery County. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I met with the chief in Prince George's County. All these different police departments. I meet with the Howard County State's Attorney's Office, April the 6th. And all of these agencies that I'm meeting with, they have issues with juveniles inside of these different jurisdictions in Maryland. Annapolis is not immune to that. And the number one individuals that are turned to help solve this problem are individuals who've been down that road before. Individuals who have been at one point in time justice involved. But I guarantee you, if you did a background check on individuals who are providing services, individuals who are part of these coalitions, individuals who support the police department, that you'll find that most of these individuals have made mistakes at one point in that time of their life. And I strongly urge you, as the Annapolis City Council, to rise to the occasion of being leaders and not follow anyone, but to make decisions that are well within your power and to make a statement that's well within your power to send the appropriate message. Anne Arundel County is supposed to be a place for everybody. That's their motto. But here we're talking about having a discussion about membership and whether or not it's appropriate for a returning citizen who made a wrong choice 30 years ago to be able to be a part of the PAB. I think that's a conversation that we shouldn't even be having. If they are allowed to vote to put a person in office, why shouldn't they be allowed to voice their opinion during and be a voting member of a police accountability board? And so I know I've taken a lot of time. I hope that I've said something that may cause you to do one thing, even if it's just to consider what I've said. And I apologize about the phones ringing. Thank you.
That's quite all right, Mr. Hatch. Mine rang just a few minutes ago also, so it happens. We feel your passion, and thank you for giving us some insight into really the impact of this legislation. So we needed to hear from you so that we would have a much better understanding. So I say thank you, and you did a great job. I'm a speech teacher. Don't ever say you don't give speeches, because you do well.
Thank you.
Ms. Harrison with CASA.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I could quickly.
Yes, Mr. Gay, I'm sorry, Alderman Gay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to clarify. When I said that there are, well, I'll clarify two things that have been stated. We hire a city attorney. We hire several city attorneys, and they have to give us an opinion. We don't have to agree with their opinion, but they have to give us their opinion. And I think it was important for me to give benefit of the doubt to the Office of Laws that related to this legislation, because we have received pushback from some members of the general public and the police department. And, you know, we don't want to be caught in a crossfire. And so it's important to have that discussion. Now, I didn't say I agreed with her or the opinion that was stated. I do think that the membership should include diverse peoples with many backgrounds as it relates to the criminal justice system, not just professional. But I just think that's important to note. You know, we have to consider our city attorney's opinion, because, you know, that's what they're paid to do, to recommend those opinions to us. But I fully support the efforts that Mr. Hatch has just laid out.
Thank you. And this is your legislation also, so it does speak to your commitment to the cause. Can we go to Ms. Harrison? Ms. Harrison, welcome. You're with CASA.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leanna Harrison. I'm the Research and Policy Analyst for CASA in Baltimore and Central Maryland. My colleagues did a really good job going over the legality and like best practices for why we're here and talking about why we're pushing these amendments. But me personally, I'm here on behalf of our 4,000 Black and Brown immigrant members who live in Anne Arundel County, and just to kind of speak on the importance of supporting the immigrant population and making sure that that everyone is included in this accountability for police. So just like to speak on economics specifically, the immigrant population is twice as likely to start a small business, and also contributes more to certain sectors such as hospitality and healthcare. But oftentimes these folks are left out as far as protections for police. We've had a couple of members in Anne Arundel County who have expressed to us that they don't feel comfortable making any form of complaint against the police because they fear that it will affect their immigration process or their status in becoming a U.S. citizen. So I just wanted to bring that up just so that it could also be part of this conversation. But I feel like my colleagues already went over most of the important parts of why we're here. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Alderman Savage, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I want to kind of, I guess comment on some of the impetus for doing the need for this. And I'm looking at the Montgomery County in particular. So Montgomery, all the jurisdictions in Maryland, I think, have to pass the bare minimums. And so looking at Montgomery County's bill, well, to be precise, they have a statement that's put out by their Office of Legislative Oversight. And it's a racial equity and social justice impact statement, which, as a side note, I think we might want to look at doing something similar for the city on our legislation. But in any case, in their summary, they say, quote, that this Office of Legislative Oversight anticipates that their bill, quote, will have little to no impact on racial and social inequities, as it does not consistently align with best practices for advancing civilian oversight to improve police accountability. It's a pretty, unless I'm reading this wrong, they're essentially saying that the state, it sounds like that the state legislation as written is not going to have they don't think it's going to have a significant impact one way or another, unless some things are passed to improve it. And I guess my question for the coalition members would be, that's one of the driving forces right behind some of your recommendations, is to try to turn this into something that you feel like is going to be really effective as far as moving that needle. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I would really defer to Amy Cruz on this one, because she's a lot more knowledgeable so far as the legalities of things than but I will say that I've looked at several different pieces of county legislation for different jurisdictions as it pertains to police accountability. And one of the things that you just read from Montgomery County, the reason why it's not going to have a significant impact is because this right here requires work. It requires leadership. And that's what everyone is looking for. It's just the bare minimum. The state didn't say that you couldn't impose things with police accountability that will best suit your jurisdiction. But what everybody is actually pulling from is, what do we have to implement? Because there's a lot of individuals that mistakenly believe that this is an attack on police, and it's not. If the department needs the community to understand what it is that they are doing, cooperate them for investigations, and they need their support in their job and their role, just like the Montgomery County police chief said. I believe his name is Chief Jones that we met with. He said it's a 50-50 relationship. I directly asked him a question. I said, what do you think about police accountability? How do you feel about the laws changing and the General Assembly passing this police accountability board? And for the record, I have this interview on tape, and he's given me permission to spread the interview around if need be. But the bottom line is if the police department is doing what it is that the department is in place to do, to serve and protect, it shouldn't be any issue or any problem with accountability. And the chief said it himself. He said the only thing that I have a concern with is to ensure that it's individuals staffed on the Police Accountability Board that are non-biased. Other than that, it should be no problem with police accountability. It requires it. When you go on, when an officer is dispatched to a call or is investigating, who are you responding to? A community member. You need them. Same thing in Annapolis. The broken, fractured relationship in Annapolis with the police department. How is that going to be repaired? And who is going to make the determination whether or not the police are an agency that we can trust, that we can count on? Well, it's only going to happen if the police department is willing to be transparent. It's only going to happen if the police department is willing to open up its doors and allow community members in there to see what's going on. And the last thing I'll say is, the police department recently in Annapolis put together like this slideshow to discuss their numbers and their metrics and, you know, all of the calls. And again, returning citizen called down there to emergency management to, you know, to review all of this information. But later on, we find out that the community also was allowed to attend these conferences with the police department. And I commend the Annapolis City Police for doing this. But it also shows you the importance of legitimacy to legitimize the work that the department is actually doing. You don't do that by creating barriers, by cutting people out, by not opening your door, by not being transparent. You have to involve the citizens that you are patrolling. And sadly, just like in Annapolis, all across Maryland, the most patrolled, police, and enforced population, as you know, is people of color, period. I know what the county demographics is made up of, but I guarantee, let's pull the numbers on the individuals who are pulled over. Let's pull the numbers of individuals who are committing crime. Let's pull those numbers. You're gonna see the high volume of calls to Harbor House, to guards, to 20. Those individuals need adequate representation. Why? Because we want to be able to go back like the caucus of African American leaders did and say, you know what, the police department, they're doing a good thing. The positive impact program is getting the traffic that it's getting because you got individuals like me who made a mistake in his past, telling people, you know what, the police, they doing a good thing, man. Man, you need to go talk to this Officer Horn at the Annapolis City Police. You really want to get your life together? Man, I don't deal with the police. Listen, he's going to be able to help you. So if we can be utilized in that capacity, then the community needs to be represented on this board. And if you're not going to do it, if we're not in the business of including the community, those individuals who have been impacted, then we might as well walk away from this. We might as well walk away from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatch. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I might, I'd like to discuss the particulars of the resolution a little bit, and I'd really like to start with the last four, primarily because I hope they're low-hanging fruit. But number 4 talks about adequately funding, and it talks about funding a number of things. And I think funding is an important issue. Rhonda McCoy has raised that from the city police, and we've heard about this, and we've heard this is an unfunded mandate. So one of the things that I think needs more clarification is funding by whom. I think because this is going to the county, we're implying that the county should provide adequate funding to sufficiently staff, and this goes through a number of staff persons that would be necessary. Number 5, again, raises the point of funding, and it's funding for legal counsel. And it does seem to me that if this accountability board is going to be viable, it would need those kinds of independent legal services. And then the last one isn't, number 6 is not about funding, but it's about the appointment of the trial judge that would be sitting on and adjudicating the things that come before the accountability board. So I would say from my perspective as a member of this committee, funding is pretty critical because you can have all the fancy words and high ideals, but if you don't put your money where your mouth is, it seems that they're empty words. And so I would certainly say we could discuss the level of staffing that's in item number 4, but for me, it would be very easy to support a resolution that says we ought to fund this effort. I'll stop there. I have more comments on the rest of it, but
If I can share where the bill is now and on those points. So we're still, we still have our recommendations as you're seeing them, but some of those ships have sailed. And one thing is the staffing actually is handled with a different piece of legislation that I think they're going to pick up as soon as this one gets passed. So they are, that would be kind of like it's just a different kind of bill. It's a staffing bill. So they would decide on the positions and the funding for those. And so your support for those amendments would be, for those recommendations would be important for us, but it's not actually in 1622. And the I don't know if you said the independent counsel piece, but, and the funding for independent counsel is also, the independent counsel would have to be created by a charter amendment. So this is something that we're still saying as a recommendation, but is unlikely to happen. So one actually very bipartisan amendment that passed last meeting, which I think is a positive development, is that the executive director will be a lawyer. So it's definitely not the same thing as having counsel who would represent them, in serving a subpoena or defending a subpoena or anything like that. But that would at least guarantee that there would be some closely affiliated lawyer who could help give day-to-day legal opinions and advice. So that's a good development as well.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. I was going to call on Ms. Berger, as city attorney, assistant city attorney. I know you've been working closely, or I think you have, with Ms. McCoy on the state legislation and the impact it will have on us. My understanding is that the county is required by the law to fund this. But can you speak to that for us?
Yes, in this specific instance, that's correct. That the Police Accountability Bill 1622 only covers the budget that the county will be supplying, of course. So there isn't any sort of impact on the city of Annapolis, but House Bill 670 as a whole has other unfunded mandates that are going to have a financial impact on the city of Annapolis. Now, the sort of caveat to that is if there is some sort of MOU or anything like that that results between the city and the county, there could be some sort of financial implication as a part of that. That's just not something that's really been discussed yet because the bill hasn't been finalized, and so it would be a premature conversation to have. But as the bill stands itself, 1622, there isn't any financial impact on the city of Annapolis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be in the future.
Thank you for that. I think my understanding was that we would probably get passed on our 1/9 of the cost. We're 1/9 of the group that, am I wrong on that? Whatever percentage is, we would be expected to pay for that proportion.
I'm not aware of that conversation or that being the case, but as the bill is written now, yes, the city of Annapolis has one representative that's going to be on the Police Accountability Board, where that representative is appointed by the mayor and then confirmed by the city council. But in terms of any sort of payment or paying 1/9 of the bill, if you will, I'm not aware of any of those conversations. That's not to say they haven't existed, but I'm not familiar with that taking place.
Okay, and I could be wrong. I thought that was part of one of Ms. McCoy's presentations to us.
And that might have been just sort of I don't want to speak on behalf of Brad and McCoy, but the way that I sort of approach it was that's a possibility because we are involved in the Police Accountability Board, and the Police Accountability Board is going to have oversight in the city of Annapolis. That could be an implication of our involvement in having that one person guaranteed, but I don't think it's really gained any steam. I think it's just sort of keep in the back of your mind that it's a possibility it could take place or could occur.
Okay, Alderman Arnett, are you proposing an amendment to page 2, 4, and 5, and 6, actually? Are you proposing an amendment to any one of those?
Well, I was getting ready to, but I think I want to change it. It sounds to me like 4 and 5 should come out of this because they're not relevant to 1622. But I'd defer back to Amy if I correctly understood that. Clearly, I think we want the sufficient staff, and I think that's the spirit of number 4. Is the sufficient staff. And number 5 is independent. I construe 5 to mean independent legal counsel. So those parts of it I subscribe to, but the funding part of it may not be appropriate in the wording. I just don't know what to do at this point.
I'll call on Alderman Savage and Alderman Gay as the sponsors.
So I don't understand your concern about the funding language.
It seems to me that what we heard from Amy was that the funding is going to be taken up in another piece of legislation. And so that leaves the thrust of number 4 and number 5, not a question of adequate funding, but really a question of adequate staffing, both adequate staff in number 4 and adequate legal services in number 5. And so if in terms of my positive vote on that, I would be voting to recommend the sense of number 4 that there should be sufficient staffing, and the sense of number 5 that there should be outside counsel. And with that understanding, I would be prepared to move forward with that part of our deliberations on this resolution.
Alderman Arnett, if I could just jump in really quickly and give you some, expand a little bit on what is before the county right now. They've passed an amendment that also allows for additional staff to the board and contractual services as needed, and also subject to the budget of the county. So there is language that is currently before the county council that was amended into the bill that would allow for the hiring of additional staff for whatever the purpose might be, as long as it's subject to the county's budget.
So in that sense, then this might be redundant to that other action. These two parts of it, which if that's correct, and I'll defer to my colleague, Alderman Schandelmeyer, because he hasn't had a chance to speak and he is on the committee. But I did want to talk about 1, 2, 3, and 6, because I think that's where there's some real substance and potentially controversy.
All right.
Alderman Schandelmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alderman Arnett. Ms. Berger, so just my question on this is pretty simple. You had some recommendations that you'd given in the staff report. Were they incorporated into the resolution as a whole in a way that you feel comfortable with if this comes out of the council for legal sufficiency?
So the legal opinion that came from my office came as a result of the resolution. So the resolution has not been amended since. I do want to say that of the 6 recommendations, several of them have either been presented to the county council in substantially similar form or have been, addressed in some form or fashion by the county council. Some of them have been voted down by the council as a whole, and some of them have been voted through. I would say of the 6, number 6 is the only one that the county council hasn't addressed in any form or fashion. And so I just want to, we can sort of get into that and discuss that a little bit more in detail, but the county council has taken up some of these recommendations. With that being said, Mr. Hatch's testimony was not part of one of the recommendations. So I just want to make it clear to the committee members that when discussing these 6 recommendations, that is exclusive of what Mr. Hatch has been testifying to. So, if you want to incorporate that in any amendments and whatnot, that to make sure that that's clear and that gets included. But the county council has addressed a lot of those recommendations, and the legal opinion from my office came out of the resolution as you're looking at it.
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
So, Ms. Berger, to be clear, Are you saying that the county council has resolved all except number 6?
They've considered quite a few of them in not identical language. So, to make it clear, for example, the Police Accountability Board budget, including independent legal services, there wasn't an amendment that specifically said that, to my knowledge. They did amend in the language for the executive director to be an attorney, and there may be another amendment that they haven't quite gotten to yet that addresses the legal counsel recommendation. But the county council did consider amendments that are related to number 1, part of number 2, number 3, I guess part of number 4. I mean, that sort of goes into the budget part, number 4. Number 5, as I've just stated, sort of it was addressed. And then number 6 is one that they have not addressed. And I don't know, at least of the 58 amendments, I don't think that was inclusive or that was included on any of the 58 amendments, but that's not to say that there won't be one at the next meeting.
Did they reject Amendment 2B? I thought they had excluded all specific references to
yes, so
groups.
They removed the ex officio members that had membership in specific groups, if you will. There was not a amendment, or I would actually have to double check. There may have been an amendment related to inclusion from specific organizations, but they did remove the ex officio language that had, I think it was the sheriff or the sheriff's designee, the police department, the chief of police or the chief's designee, and then some county positions were included in the ex officio list, and that got removed because of the concerns related to, where do you sort of draw the line with including organizations as ex officio members, and then are you going to have more ex officio members than actual members of the PAB itself, and so it just got struck in its entirety. But I do not believe, and I could be wrong, that 2B was never in an amendment before the county council. 2A has been considered by the county council and was amended into the legislation to allow for recommendations from the county council members to the county executive from their respective districts for PAB membership.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So really, as with all resolutions, the real meat of it is in the be it resolved clause. And the be it resolved clause is that the city council, if it passes this, is supporting the recommendations of the coalition. And I think it sounds like all of the 1 through 6 and possibly others are really in flux right now. So it gets down to a question of, do we want to have a recommendation to the council that we pass this resolution, giving the sense that we support essentially what our concepts provided here. And so then that leads me to, I'm sure that the coalition would like us to do that. I guess I would turn to Ms. Berger and say, is there something that is contrary to the recommendations that you gave us in your legal opinion that would make it harmful for us to support these concepts? That's really what they are. They're not specifics at this point.
I'm not sure I follow your question.
The question is, if the council were to pass this, is there something that is of disadvantage to the city in some way? Otherwise, for me, I'm very much inclined to vote on this committee that we recommend that the city council vote favorably to support this resolution. And I guess I'm just looking for, is there some cautionary statement that would say that we might not want to do that, or we might want to amend that in some way?
Well, I think you have to take into consideration the actions that have already been taken by the county council and how they've responded to some, because of course the county council is familiar with the recommendations, and there have been amendments that have been introduced as a result of the recommendations. So some of these recommendations are moot at this point. So it's just something to sort of take into consideration. And, you know, of course, you guys have seen the staff report, you guys have seen the legal opinion that the concerns of the legality of just really the one recommendation. And that was the only sort of input that the law office had as it relates to the recommendations. I can't really, you know, advise you as to whether or not something is politically a good idea or not. So,
oh, please.
You know, I just would, you know, defer to
right.
what our opinion was when it was issued.
Thank you.
Alderman Savage and then Alderman Gay.
May I, sorry, I've had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm worried, no, I'm worried that I might be able to shine some light on some of our, at least our intent or our request. So the coalition is asking for what you were suggesting, Alderman Arnett, for just a general support of these recommendations. We understand that, as Ms. Berger said, that the specific amendments aren't mirroring the language of our recommendations, and we know that. And so, you know, we're supporting and opposing amendments as they come up based on that kind of what you were saying. I can't remember if you said principles or that sort of thing. And while some are probably permanently moot, there are amendments that are coming back that were either voted down or amendments to amendments that are coming up on Monday. And some of those things are for significant developments that have happened at the state level or even locally in terms of like change of support. So let's not like count anything out. We understand we're not going to get everything that we're asking for here, but I also think that some of the things that were voted down, I know are going to be reintroduced on Monday. So it's still important for us and I think, we didn't talk about this earlier. I don't think there's a good chance that the entire bill will be voted on Monday, but I think Monday may be the last chance that some of these amendments, and if there are any amendments that go after Monday, it wouldn't be many. So Monday's really the day for amendments, and then I'm thinking that the final vote would be 2 weeks from then. And so I think it is more just of a general kind of statement of the spirit of these recommendations that you would be giving. And yeah, and I think...
And that spirit is for broader inclusion, a wider representation of the groups, a wider representation of Mr. Hatch and people that have that background. So, I mean, that's what I'm taking away from this. These recommendations in this whereas clause with the 6 recommendations are illustrative of things that may have already become moot or may get changed again, but that the overall reason for the council to support this is this broader inclusionary aspect to the recommendations.
Exactly. And I think, you know, we're doing a lot. And I think as Ms. Berger said, there's a lot going on in terms of how this is changing internal processes in the police department. It's a lot of work going into this. And there's been a lot of work on the advocacy for police reform. And so we've got this police accountability board. Let's make it reflective of our community, and let's have it aimed. And, you know, speaking directly to you, to my alderman, Ross Arnett, that, you know, building trust in the community, especially in high crime areas, is really, really important. We want people to trust their police. We want people to talk to police. You know, that's something that's really important, and it's not contrary at all to public safety. In fact, I believe that, you know, building trust and accountability is public safety. The last thing I just wanted to mention when it comes to we do disagree with the legal analysis by the city and the county, and we provided our legal letter on March 14th to all of you by email. It's really long, sorry, that's how we roll. Very detailed. Happy to talk more about that if you need, but there is a difference in opinion. We disagree. It is, you can read 670 on your own. And, I think to us, and, definitely all respect and no offense to any of the lawyers for, any government agencies, but these are the same law offices that defend police when police get sued. So to me, in my world, just thinking of both how much the police have been involved in building this. The police have been at the table, and like you said, Rhonda McCoy's multiple presentations, the police have been at the table drafting this thing from day one, and so the offices of law. And again, for us, the point is not that they shouldn't be in the room or that they shouldn't, be part of the process, but the community has not been at those tables. And again, we believe that the police and the police department's lawyers, AKA the county office of law and the city office of law, have some conflict of interest here. And so please take a look at the letter that I sent to you all on March 14th, if any of that legal stuff worries you. Thank you.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, just to Mr. Cruz, I think really spoke to it well. But my first of all, I guess 3 comments. First of all, let's keep in mind that I think as Alderman Arnett worked himself around to was this resolution is to convey the sense of the council. And I think in many ways this is general support, but it also does speak to some specifics. But I think also to Ms. Cruz's point, it's not a moot point until there's a final vote, as we know very well with how our legislation sometimes gets tweaked up until the end. So let's keep, I think that's why it's important to keep these in here, even if they have already been addressed. It helps to, I think, reinforce those. I think that there's also the fundamental point, which we've touched on, which I think is important to keep in here, regarding the point about giving the main board, the Police Accountability Board, which that includes most of the members of the public, right? That's the largest, has the largest membership, and that's what people are going to think of. The public's going to think of when they hear about this new oversight. They're going to think of that PAB, and as it's currently written, that board really is only restricted to 2 things. One is recommending new policies, that come out of everything they've observed from the different boards that they appoint to. And the second main power is appointing members to the other 2 boards, the trial board and the, what's the other board? The ACC, right? But again, the PAB is going to be what most people are thinking of. So I think in terms of the first recommendation, it's to give additional optional powers to that PAB, because that is what people are going to think of as the main board, and that again has the main representation from the public. And so I think that recommendation just ensures that they have the tools available to them to achieve the overall intention, which is to increase police accountability. And I mean the overall intention of the state law and of what the legislature intended. I think we can quite comfortably say that's clearly the intent of the law that's passed. Our law office's opinion on this particular recommendation was based on a really narrow interpretation of intention, that the law says that each board, that because the law gives specific powers to each individual board, that there can be no crossover of powers. And that's not what the law says. It doesn't say that these powers are exclusive to each of these bodies. That was purely just the opinion, as stated, of the intention of that particular setup. That has not been clarified by the legislature. It's not been clarified in the law, and that's why I do think some of the language from our law office's opinion was rather, lack of a better word, kind of extreme in the sense that it stated that it's legally insufficient. But I think it's really not clear one way or another, frankly, if it's legally sufficient or not. We've seen opinions on both sides. And I think because the law doesn't clearly prohibit this, I would think would make it inappropriate to say that this is legally insufficient. And so that's why I think it's also really important to look at the overall intention of legislation, not just the narrow intention, but the overall intention of legislation, which is to further police accountability, which is exactly what these recommendations are working towards.
Thank you, Alderman Savage. Alderman Gay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel bad because I should have let Alderman Savage have the last word, as he's kind of been the chair sponsor of this piece of legislation. But I guess my last piece would kind of be a summary of both what he stated and what the members before the committee have stated. As I've told the assistant city attorney previously, I think the best way to see that if this will be effective is to actually get it up and running. And I think that's what I'm most anxious to see. And we don't want it to be so successful that we have 180 reports a month coming in. We don't want that. We actually want the opposite. We want these bodies to not field as many reports, because if they do, then that lets us know we have a legitimate problem in this county, which some people say we do have, but we've seen some instances in both the county and city and policing where there are issues. As Mr. Hatch stated earlier, that does not mean every officer acts that way. I've had a number of interactions and engagements with the department here in the city, and I think that for the most part, everyone seems to be on board with this. There are some that are hesitant, but I think my big issue, and I think where the pushback, even when Alderman Savage introduced the legislation in 2020 for police reform here in the city, we are not attacking the police department at all. As Amy stated earlier, and anyway, I think this enhances their efforts in communities, and particularly in communities that I represent in Ward 6. People want to cooperate with the police. People want to, help get bad actors off of the streets, and particularly as it relates to violent crime, not nonviolent offenses. But there has to be a level of trust. And I think the best way forward would be with some sort of board, as they are establishing here, that can field civilian questions and handle it in a way appropriate where the community feels that their voice and their input is being heard. And I think that's what everybody has been saying over the last hours, and that we've really been saying since 2020 when we were out there protesting and stuff. It's just create a fair opportunity within the criminal justice system as it relates to certain instances involving police and civilian. And I think the members of this council agree with that. And probably we will pass this resolution to recommend to the council that they take, to the county council, that they take these into consideration again, even in particularly, I think the second note could be modified and brought forth in an amendment, and an additional amendment, which I would support and be active and vocal for. And so I think everybody has made it very clear, as we're just supporting the community and the police department as we try to, better those relationships. And so I think the presentations were really helpful, I think, for members of the council today.
Thank you, Alderman. Committee members, what's your pleasure?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we recommend favorably the passage of this resolution by the City Council.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of giving R1522 a favorable recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Sincere thank you to Ms. Cruz, Mr. Hatch, and Ms. Harrison. your testimony today had a significant impact on the discussion on this legislation. So I thank you for joining us and sharing
Madam Chair. And
your
thank you.
professionalism and your personal experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have we exhausted our agenda?
Well, we did have an amendment to talk about 06, and we do have people that have waited patiently for 2 hours.
Yes, I wrote that on another sheet. So discussion on 0621, which was the legislation that we passed last spring that would require notification of the council of any changes to rules and procedures by the departments. And as we're having to hear from department heads now, as they're following the code, we still have some questions about how this is going to be instituted. And we know that from previous discussions that there are some blanks, there's some unknowns in this legislation. And so I'll put that out there now for discussion. I do know that I asked Ms. Leonard to come up with some language on one piece of this. So we are gonna have to sponsor another piece of legislation to fill the voids in this ordinance. I'll go to Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have two things. I think, first of all, we had a very good example of how I think the process was intended to work when HPC came. They had promulgated their rule changes. They came, we had a good discussion with them, and we voted to indicate that we had received it. The way the legislation was crafted, the council does not have approval authority for changes in rules and regulations. We have review authority, and then from there, the only power we have is if we don't like what's in a rule, we can change the city code. So that's a pretty heavy lift, and I think that I would hope it never happens, and if it did, it would be an extremis. What we have today, and the harbor master has been patiently waiting to participate, is a change in a form subsequent to us receiving control of the long dock down in the harbor, and that is form. And I actually asked the harbor master or Ashley to speak to that. That looks like a form that's pretty consistent with forms that are used elsewhere in giving people berths in the slips and the mooring buoys for the city. This is a change in past practice where, and I have before me a very brief form where the Annapolis Waterfront and Sailing Center had a very brief one-page form, and they have raised some questions, which I would summarize down to a very basic question, which is, I do believe, and I personally believe, and I think the city believes, I have had direct discussions with the mayor, and I will take the liberty of representing him. He believes that tall ships visiting the city are a good idea. And so the only real concern I have, not getting into the micromanaging of the form, is whether we're doing things that would discourage tall ships from visiting Annapolis. And the one thing that has been pointed out in terms of this form is having tall ships put a credit card I guess leaving a credit card with the harbor master. And I don't know how onerous that is. I've been told some of the tall ships don't have a credit card. They're volunteer organization. So I think that in terms of the specific agenda item, which is to discuss 06, I think we need to put that back on our agenda for our next time to talk about possible amendments to make it some of the deficiencies more clear. But in deference to the harbor master, if the committee is willing to engage in some discussion of the form, even though I don't think this has been promulgated in the paper or on the city website, I think time is of the essence for this because we have some tall ships coming for the uprigging. And so we really would kind of like to get this cleared up.
Alderman, I saw something from the harbor master, but why was it not put on our agenda for this meeting?
Well, because it came to light very recently. We had, I forget, maybe Beth can help me. We had a big meeting after the long dock was turned over to the city with a lot of, March 14th, right. So a lot of the stakeholders were there. And in the meantime, this hasn't been happening in a vacuum. There have been discussions with the mayor, the city manager, director trader, the harbor master, and so forth about how we're going to manage it. And I think the general conclusion is we want one body to manage all of the different availability of berthing boats. And this just happens to be a new opportunity, and it's a subset of boats berthing at the long dock, which is, it's specifically geared for nonprofit or not-for-profit reservations. At this point, I have exhausted my capability. It's probably time for Ashley to jump in and bail me out or clear things up, but that is the specific issue at hand, is this new form, which is a new rule, and it should be promulgated according to rules and regulations.
Ms. Leonard, can you shed some light? So are we, it sounds like two different things.
It is.
You know, so what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with the change in the new form?
Well, it's not a change per se. So we already have a properly adopted forms and policies for all of our other docks that you can find on our city website. So the transient docking spaces and the charter docks already have forms similar to this one that have been properly promulgated. We've had this one sort of in the wings waiting for when we would actually take ownership of the long dock, the Burtis House dock, which just happened recently. And so now that we have ownership for it, we need to establish some policies so that everyone is on the same page about how this new dock is going to be used. Because there's nothing really in the code or in any of the other adopted policies that apply. The feeling internally was that unlike the charter dock, which is pretty much commercial, and the other docks, which are controlled by DNR and federal big grants, that we wanted to do something different with this, which is to, I don't want to say cater, but to consider the needs of not-for-profit or nonprofit vessels as a priority, which doesn't mean, so we structured this that they could do sort of at the beginning of the calendar year, that they could get some priority months of booking where they would, the non-profit or commercial vessels wouldn't have that opportunity to book during those first initial months. We've talked about different, right now, the way it's written is that those types of boats would also not be required to pay any fees. But the credit card, to address Alderman Arnett's thing, is that we do want to enforce a cancellation policy, because in the past, there have been some, I would say, concerns with these types of ships making reservations and then canceling, not showing up, not providing notice. So the idea was to not necessarily charge them on the credit card, but to hold them to some accountability, that if they can't give us sort of timely notice that they're not coming, so to allow someone else to come, we will charge them a cancellation fee. So that's where the credit card tags in. If you don't have a credit card, you can't really enforce a cancellation policy, which means there's no accountability on these types of ships we are giving a priority to. So in exchange for the priority, we're asking that they abide by a cancellation policy. And then of course, if none of the spaces are filled up by the not-for-profit, nonprofit, then next priority would go to other commercial vessels that would like to use the space if it's available. And so this whole process is to adopt a brand new policy for a brand new dock that we just acquired ownership to.
Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't expect that we'll have these issues coming before us on a regular basis.
No, everything else for the city docks has already been adopted, and unless there's material changes, they're all set. So it's just for this new one dock.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Bellis, may I ask, are we having a problem with cancellations or no-shows, I guess is maybe a better description? Ms. Bellis?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
I think...
She's not frozen, is she?
I think that's
Ms.
your
Bellis?
She might not be...
I think I'm here now.
Oh, okay,
Yep, you're
good.
Okay, we can hear you now. Did you hear my question?
No, can you repeat it? I had a problem.
Are we having a problem with no-shows or people making reservations and then not paying for them, you know?
Yes. So we have had many vessels that have reserved in the past, and then when they don't have any, as we could say, like skin in the game, they don't show and they don't cancel. And then at the same time, we're turning away all of these vessels. So just to clarify what Ashley said, the credit card is for two reasons. One is, I think most folks would like to charge our nonprofits for electric only. The docking would be free. I did share with Takia Green a spreadsheet, had all of the comments I received after our stakeholder meeting. I'm hoping you received it. If you didn't, you could review it before the next meeting. But I will tell you that I didn't hear from a single nonprofit. They all said, absolutely, we should pay for our electric. We're fine with that. But I would say, I agree with Ashley, the greater purpose for the credit card is because if you don't show and you don't cancel, that's not, you need to have some accountability there. So that was the purpose for that. And if you looked at the spreadsheet overall, I think you would see maybe 75 to 80% of the comments thought that the draft policy was probably leaning towards too much prioritization for the tall ships and educational vessels. However, I think that is the mayor's vision. I think that's super important for the city of Annapolis. So when Ashley and I drafted it, we worked really hard to make sure that they could have everything that they needed without having a monopoly on the dock and without serving space and then not showing up. So that was the goal. And then the second goal was to backfill. When there's no historic or educational ships at the dock, then we backfilled to make revenue for the city and to make sure that, there were possibly some commercial endeavors that could take place there. Maybe not the first year, but maybe moving on in the spaces where there weren't any tall ships or educational boats serving other needs.
Okay.
And the form, it has an a lengthy set of instructions attached to it, and it makes a lot of this policy very clear, including the desire if you say you're going to come and then you don't, then there's going to be some consequences.
That's true. So it says give, a 72-hour window. So if you canceled 3 days out, there wouldn't be any fee at all, and that would be fine. But if you didn't cancel between 1 and 3 days, you would have a half charge. And if you didn't cancel at all or within the 24-hour window and you were supposed to arrive, then there would be a full charge. And in truth, I have spoken to many of the organizers and the captains between the time that we talked about the draft policy and now, and I haven't heard a single captain other than I did hear from Alice Estrada that she didn't like that policy, but every other person has said, you know what, that's fair. We're okay with that.
I'm looking at the document now and I see, and thank you for highlighting in red the comments.
I mean, I think that the Wilma Lee is a super important vessel for Chesapeake Bay history. I mean, I can tell you in my 20 years of conservation law enforcement, jacks have a place in my heart. But we need to remember that they have a place in Back Creek, and all of our reservations can adjust their time. So assuming it's a hot July day and I want to come at 2 p.m., but I look at the hourly weather and I can see that it's likely that we're going to have thunderstorms between 2 and 5. They can all come earlier or later, or they can look at the weather 3 days ahead and cancel altogether. But they can also adjust their times daily because those docks are not full. So I think it's fair. Most of our folks think it's fair. If we don't hold anyone available, if we don't let anyone accountable at all, it's so easy in the Chesapeake Bay to say, you know what, it was 15 knots of wind, it was too much for me, or there was thunderstorms to the south of us. It will get to the point where I feel some people could take advantage of that. And that's what we don't want to see happen, because a lot of our visitors are coming from close. And they'll be shut out for a boat that didn't do their homework or maybe didn't really look at what they should have looked at.
So, committee members, what is your pleasure? Again, this is something that we simply need to give a blessing to, that the steps Ms. Bellis is taking will be advantageous to what she's doing. So Alderman Arnett and then Alderman, are you two voting? Channelmeyer. You're on mute.
I just wanted to say that I thought the policy sounded pretty reasonable. You can kind of compare it to the yes button on a Facebook event where you have no real stakes. You just sort of say, yep, I'll be there to potentially reserve a space, and there's no consequences for canceling. So I think it's a pretty reasonable first step.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Arnett?
Yes, Madam Chair, you're absolutely correct in pointing out our job is to review, which I believe we have, and note our receipt of it. And I did make the effort to let a lot of the people who have sent me comments on this aware that we would be talking about this at this meeting today, and they had the opportunity to be here, and I don't see them. So I'm not sure that I would take that as a yes vote, but I certainly would say that they had the opportunity to provide input at this meeting, and they did not. And so I think, again, like we did with the HBC, a simple notation for the record in the minutes, the action minutes, that we received and reviewed the proposed form as is required by city code. And I would make a motion to
Okay.
that effect.
Can I get a second to that motion, Alderman Schnellmeyer?
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to give a favorable nod to the new form changes in, I know we don't have to take an official vote, but from the Harbor Master's office, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. But I do want to quickly, because we have at least we have two people from the Office of Law with action minutes. It simply records the agenda and any vote taken unless you note for the record that you want something included in the minutes. And that's really was the thrust of my motion, is I wanted to include it in the minutes that we received and reviewed the form per the requirements of city code. We really don't have an approval or disapproval of these forms. We just have an acknowledgement that we received and reviewed it.
Yes, Alderman, and I know that Ms. Green is listening to this conversation and it will be duly noted. And I am sure that in my report to the council, it will be acknowledged there also. Okay, I see Mr. Johnson with us. Is there something that's on the agenda that you'd like to speak to, Mr. Johnson?
No, Alderwoman, I didn't have anything. I was just attending, and I was invited to come forward, so I did.
Okay, well, thank you.
Good to have
for attending. Yes, absolutely. So, anything else that's on? I think we've exhausted our agenda. Anything else for the good of the order?
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Good meeting, a little longer than normal, but